I want to speak about anger and suicide. Sometimes people say that attachment is the strongest and most difficult of the afflictive emotions that we have to contend with, because it is so invisible to us sometimes, and once we're in the grips of attachment, we just are very attached to it. You know, attachment breeds attachment. But in the Dharma, it is taught consistently that the most dangerous for us of the afflictive emotions is anger, hatred. And you know, there's this very pithy expression of one spark can burn, and we know, because we live in fire country here in the West, that one spark can burn down a whole forest. And one spark of anger can burn down our whole bodhicitta. A relative bodhicitta can be damaged by an expression of anger. Ultimate bodhicitta cannot be damaged by anything. It's our true nature, obviously, so it's not possible to damage it at all. But the relative bodhicitta can be affected by anger. So as bodhisattvas in training, we need to become very aware of the slightest movements of anger. And this is true for all the afflictive emotions. It's true for confusion, ignorance, jealousy. It's true for attachment and grasping and lust as well. But I want to focus on anger for a minute. So in the basket of anger, hatred, is not just what we think of as anger, anger. It's also the slightest impulse of rejection, of hostility, of self-righteous judgment of another. It's the subtlest as well as the most dramatic, the murderous impulse. You know, let's say that's the extreme, but that is in the same continuum with did you see that? Just looking at somebody with disdain, or looking at somebody with disgust, or looking at somebody with displeasure. And the eyes carry that energy. It's not just voice giving voice, eyes carry that energy. You know, I've stopped people dead in their tracks by looking at them in a certain way. I mean, stopped on a dime and looked at me and turned around and walked the other direction, just by the way I looked at them. So the eyes carry that energy. Our body position carries the energy of anger and repudiation and rejection. I mean, we're communicating all the time. We're always communicating. The words are just it's like the tip of the communication process in a sense. And so just as a warm glance to somebody is carried through the eyes and the body language and the energetic expression, and can warm somebody's day, you know, you can cheer somebody up just by a glance, kind of making contact, you know, in a kind of loving way. So anger can do the same. It can be like a dagger or like a gun. You can destroy someone's peace of mind in an instant, by an instant of your anger towards them. And it can happen whether you're in their physical presence or not. And that's true also for love. You know, love has no obstacle. So, but remember, I started today with saying that Milarepa says we are not ashamed of ourselves. And then Rinpoche says, only be ashamed of not generating bodhicitta, love and compassion. There's a form of anger, hatred that we don't talk about very much, and that's self-hatred. Disdain and anger and hatred and disgust or repudiation of the self towards oneself. That's not the same thing as acknowledging that one's grasping to a selfness in oneself or in other phenomena, other beings, is the source of all our suffering. That's saying when we have hatred towards the self, it is a fixation on the illusory solidity of that self. It's actually, it's self-grasping turned vile. Yes? Do you understand what I mean? It's self-grasping, but it's not self-grasping to lift, it's self-grasping to take down. And so Rinpoche teaches that the extreme of self-grasping is suicide. That's an extreme of self-grasping. That is thinking that if I kill my body, my suffering will cease. The suffering is in the mind's continuum. The suffering is in consciousness. The suffering's not in the body. The pain may be in the body, but the aspect of mind that can generate hatred for oneself is not about pain in the body. It's about pain in the mind, suffering. And the suffering of suicidality is a complete misunderstanding of the nature of reality, and deserves and must, for each of us, when we're encountering that in ourselves or others, call forth the greatest possible compassion. The greatest possible compassion. And skillful means. To intervene as we are able, to get help in any way we can. What we want to do is to create a pause in the trajectory towards suicide. We want to just create a pause. If we can't prevent, because you really can't prevent somebody from killing themselves, any more than you can prevent somebody from just being unkind to themselves. You can't really prevent it. It has to happen from within us, yes? So you create a pause, if you can, to give time for the mind to change, for something to change, find a place of safety, create conditions of safety, rescue when you can rescue, prevent action when you can prevent action. In other words, throw yourself on the line. Hazard yourself if necessary to prevent somebody from taking their own life. And do it for all beings. Do it for the benefit of all beings. Take every action to benefit one for the benefit of all. The efficacy of our actions to be of benefit depend on our motivation. The greater, the vaster, the more profound and wide our motivation, the greater the benefit of our action, of body, speech, or mind, to benefit others. So always, when there's one who's suffering and you are with that one, see that one as the representative of all suffering beings. And then your action to benefit that one is very vast in its merit and very vast in its benefit. Please remember this. This is a crucial instruction for us on the Bodhisattva path. Motivation is everything. So if our motivation is to benefit all beings, every single being is a representative of them all. So we practice one in the many and the many in the one. We see the one as the representative of all, and when we're practicing to benefit all sentient beings, we're also seeing the one. We're also benefiting the one. And you are one of those ones. Each of us is one of those ones. So if we're seeking to lift the veil of anger from the minds of confused beings, let it lift the veil of anger from our mind as well. And if we're looking to lift the veil of, to pierce or penetrate or lift the veil of anger from our mind, see it as a contribution to freeing all from the confusion and insanity of anger. Yes? This is very important on the path. Very important. Because suffering isolates us. You know that from your own experience of suffering, I'm sure. Mental suffering in particular tends to isolate us. And it's you know that many are suffering from very profound depression. And sometimes suicide is the outcome of that process. It's very hard to intervene, but you do your best. Don't be afraid of making mistakes on the Bodhisattva path. Hazard yourself. If you're not making mistakes, you're probably not hazarding yourself quite enough. And the instruction is given when we talk about the Bodhisattva trainings. We'll talk about this some more on I forget, whatever day it is that I have planned for talking about that some more. I can't remember what day it is today. But the instruction is given for us as we train on the Bodhisattva path to train gently in the disciplines, to train gently on the path. And that's not so that we're not overwhelmed. That's not so we feel good. That's not so that we can maintain our balance and do it all perfectly, whatever that might look like. It's so that our bodhicitta is not damaged. Because it's like with physical exercise. If you exercise enthusiastically beyond your capacity, you're likely to damage both your enthusiasm and your capacity. Yes? You can hurt yourself and not be able to get back on the machine or to climb the mountain again or to get back on the horse. Like I never got back on the horse because I was injured. I was too enthusiastic in an unbridled, so to speak, way. Pardon the pun, not intended, but very good. I'm not very good, right? So training gently in the Bodhisattva disciplines means to train within capacity, stretching capacity little by little, as we do when we're learning a new exercise, you know? That's good news, right? That's good news. But it does mean pushing the limits, but it doesn't mean exceeding them, except, my dear ones, in an emergency. In an emergency, to help someone else or save someone else, whether it's a person or not, you're permitted to go beyond your capacity in that moment because you're thrown forward by your compassion, yes? You don't think about it. You run for the bus that, just got attacked. You run to save the children. You just throw yourself there. You're not thinking, well, am I exceeding my compassion capacity here? Should I pull back so that my bodhicitta is comfortable? No, go ahead, throw yourself in, do whatever you have to, and then when you are out of the emergency situation, you restore balance by replaying it in a way that is measured and by allowing yourself really to recognize there, yes, I exceeded capacity in that moment because I forgot self, so therefore nobody was damaged. But if you're not able to do that, it may be that the bodhicitta is damaged a little bit, but only temporarily, by regret for having exceeded your capacity and perhaps thrown yourself out of balance in some way, yes? So if you regret a beneficial action, if you regret a noble action, that a little bit weakens your bodhicitta commitment and capacity. But because bodhicitta is of the mind, it can be repaired. If you break the bodhisattva vow or if you damage your bodhicitta a little bit, don't worry about it. Just take a break, take a breath, come back again. But it's of the mind. The motivation can be maintained regardless of what the capacity is. Right? So when I'm recovered from this dramatic action that I took to try to prevent da-da-da-da, when I've recovered, I'll be able again to act, fairly overtly and explicitly, but meantime, I'll continue to nourish my Bodhisattva motivation. In other words, my bodhicitta. Yes? Is this helpful? Because some of us are living in the world, right? Yeah. You never know what's going to happen. You never know. It's more important that we love than that we live. And it's easier too. Actually, living is very difficult. We have to contend with the body all the time. It is so recalcitrant, but loving is not of the body. Loving is of the ultimate nature, and it will carry us. Loving will carry us. I'll read you a poem if I can find it. Yes, here it is. Let compassion mount the mighty steed of love and turn them loose. Manes streaming, churning, flanks gleaming, eyes fierce with freedom, the whole lost feral herd will follow them home. If in order to accomplish the liberation of beings, we give up our life, it's only permitted in this tradition that we do that when we really understand emptiness. We're not permitted to promiscuously throw away our life. Because until we understand emptiness, there's a great deal of confusion about self. Yes? Again, in an emergency, that's okay. In an emergency, sometimes we'll give up our life in order to benefit or save another. That's giving up our life for good, for the good. But it's also taught that, you remember in the verse that talks about not committing wrongdoing even at the risk of one's own life? And how shocking that is to our system to think that, It still makes me laugh. I mean, I'm laughing at myself. I could give you a whole catalog of reasons I'm laughing at myself, but we won't go there. In the case of indulging in actions that harm others, we risk, because of the nature, because of the dynamic nature of karma, we risk lifetimes already made of progress on the spiritual path. Whereas if we give up a life, a single life, to benefit another, the way a mother does sometimes, for example, in giving birth. right? Giving up her life that the child can be born. I mean, that's something that happens over and over all the time. And I've seen it with insects too, you know. I mean, there are insects that die the minute the insect is, the birth is created. Your act of selfless virtue that looks as if it costs you your life actually is giving up something material for the enrichment of your selfless love capacity. You following this? Yeah. So I'm not suggesting that we should go running out and jump onto train tracks. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I'm suggesting that we would do well to really look realistically and without any flinching at the fact that this life that we have right now is temporary by its nature, very temporary, in an instant for countless reasons. We could suddenly die. You know, it's very fragile. This is very fragile. This is not a strong thing. And the causes that bring it into being, it's taught in the Dharma that goodness is what gives one the opportunity to have a human life. That acts of goodness, thoughts of goodness, that the goodness is how the human life comes into being. We could be anything else, and probably if we look at the teachings about different, you know, incarnations and so on, we probably have been anything else, you know, everything else. But our acts of goodness bring forth spiritual opportunity, because it's also taught that the human lifetime is the greatest opportunity for spiritual progress. In the human lifetime, there's exactly the most judicious blend of suffering and opportunity, suffering and freedom. Isn't that good news? So let us take advantage of that judicious blend of suffering and freedom, and really let our minds rest in the knowledge that truth is, and we are of that, and that love is its natural radiance, and we are of that, and our upwelling of compassion and love is power for the good for all, and our consciously taking that up as our standard and bearing that as the banner under which we walk on the Bodhisattva path is for us to step forth as Bodhisattvas. We think of ourselves as Bodhisattvas in training, but it's taught that as soon as you give rise to bodhicitta, you are a Bodhisattva in fact. And from that moment on, especially after you take the Bodhisattva vow, from that moment on, every action of body, speech, and mind generates merit for you and benefit for others, even sleeping. Even sleeping. Isn't that extraordinary to even think of that? So we're encouraged to recognize not just, oh, I aspire to be a bodhisattva, but that in this moment, this is a bodhisattva coming into being and power. Let's not waste this. Deal? This is the Bodhisattva deal. And we're not limited by time and place. Not at all. Or by the physical body. We're not limited at all by that. It may look like it, but it's not the case. had cancer some years ago, actually many years ago, and people were praying for me so assiduously in my Sangha that I felt as if I were being held in a hammock of light, and that under the worst possible conditions, I was only going to drop maybe 1/4 of an inch, but I'd be caught and held. I could feel the power of the prayer and the constant practice that was going on, and they were littering the hallways of the hospital. It was great. People were bringing them food. It was like a cafeteria taking place outside my room. It was just great, and everybody thought I was high and happy because of the morphine, but it wasn't because of the morphine. It was because of all the bodhicitta. You know, the hospital was like being scrubbed with bodhicitta. It was just fabulous. You experienced this too, right? Yeah, it's just beautiful when it happens like that. So there's no limit to the power of this selfless love. There's no limit to it. And there's no obstacle to it. It cannot be stopped. So there. So now, I'm wondering if you would like to have a discussion time or question and answer session. We've got the mic problem worked out so that our dakini in the back will flit around, bringing the mic to whoever wants to speak so we can actually hear each other. It's frustrating when we can't hear, so it means that I'm not able to respond to what's actually being presented, and we want to solve that, so we fix the mic. And also, with the mic going, the questions and responses, not always answers, but certainly some kind of response, is also in part of the online streaming. And we've had at least one question from somebody watching online also, which is neat. And I love this technology. It's just really remarkable. Yeah. So is that something that would be of interest to you? I don't have any questions that have been put here for me to look at in writing. And we can continue to talk if we want. I'm not going to start another topic until tomorrow morning. But we can, you can raise anything you'd like to, and maybe I can say something that might be of use. I don't know, but I don't always have answers for the questions. I'm not a scholar. I've been a scholar, but in a different world altogether. I'm not a scholar in the Dharma world. I'm just a yogini. I'm a little yogini, just practicing on union. That's it. But from that place, if I can offer anything, I'm happy to, so feel free. Eric, did you want to speak? Eric is here.
Yes.
Would it help would it help if the speaker stands up? Would that help, do you think? Might help the speaker.
Earlier today, Barbara, you mentioned authentic compassion versus sentimental compassion, I think is what the words you used.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that and give us a little bit of insight?
Yeah. Authentic compassion is objective, has to do with the suffering of others. Sentimental compassion is more emotionally based, and really, even though it may be compassion too, caring about others, it will have some admixture of self-reference. And one of the tip-offs for this is the little happy glow you feel when you are aware of yourself being compassionate. That's a pretty good sign. You like that? Right. Does that address your question, or would you like to go deeper?
It does. It's helpful. The other part of that is I find it easier to be compassionate at the whole world rather than compassionate at somebody who cut me off on the freeway,
Yes.
right? It's a lot harder to be compassionate about that one person.
Yeah. Because one you have a kind of abstract love for, the other one you hate in the moment. Yeah, that makes it hard to be compassionate. Hatred and compassion don't work all that well together, and that little reaction on the freeway is a reaction of hatred. And we can call it, oh, I was just annoyed, but it's hate. You know, remember road rage? Yeah, right. That's the extreme example of that little moment of pique, of little annoyance. I've transformed that a few times on the road for myself with a simple, very simple device in the mind, that when I recognize that arising, I say, I really desire that you reach your destination safely, and Tara, will you please help this being neither come to harm nor cause harm? And then that's objective compassion, because that is not stuck on the otherness of the other, but of the equality of all beings. That we all are suffering, we all are confused, we all get angry, and many of us are often behind the wheel. So let's take this in the way that works. And that really does transform. That's an example of what I spoke to earlier when I said, when you don't have the aspiration, aspire to have the aspiration. Yes? So if in that moment you're pissed off and you don't have the compassion, act as if. Ask for the compassion or express the compassion objectively, so that it bypasses and undercuts and transforms the personal investment aspect, which is where sentimentality can come in, or rage, for example. Does that? Yeah. It's extremely simple. This is an economy of the mind. Yeah? It's very simple what we're talking about. This is an example of you replace the erroneous concept or conceptualization with the one that's grounded in truth. So you replace a subjectivity, which always has to do with self, with objectivity, which just lifts the entire conversation out of the realm of self and into the realm of the equality of all sentient beings, one taste. Yeah? Thank you for that question. Yeah. Is it satisfactory? You look. He's still. He's cogitating. He's reflecting on this profound topic.
Well, what it is when you answer something, and you do answer something.
When you answer my question, and it is a satisfactory answer to me, it just triggers another follow-on thought, right?
Yes, of course. But Eric, that's you.
That's me. Right. One thing that, again, back to compassion, the concept of fake it until you make it. In other words, you're not really compassionate, but you tell yourself, I'm supposed to be compassionate, so let me bite my tongue and I'll be compassionate. I don't sense that when I do that, it is out of the right motivation, but is there any benefit to just force yourself to think of compassion even though you're not there?
I think it's always beneficial to remember what is true in a moment when you're caught in what is not.
Okay.
Because being caught in subjectivity is fixation. And when you're fixated, you're rigid and unchangeable. You can't even respond creatively to the situation, much less to your own mind. So fixation is really comes from a grabbing to the self, right? Fixated, so. Yeah? Okay. Thank you. Anybody else want to say? Yes. And say your name. Oh, do you want? Maybe you don't. Some people don't want their name online, so don't say your name if you don't want to. And I apologize if I say your name, but yeah.
It is Jay. It is. Yeah, go by Jay.
Powerful name.
I know. I'm sorry. I have more of a statement. Yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry, that just was
More of a
hilarious.
statement, yes. But I appreciated because one of the things that you said as a response was, Tara, have this person go, because there are many things that my feeling nature and my nature, it feels small.
Mhm.
But if I can, or that it's unfamiliar territory.
Mhm.
But with Tara, with me, it becomes much easier, and then there's a real joy. There's more of a joy with it.
That is
So,
beautiful.
I appreciate you bringing, and it's a great reminder, because that's something, that just being reminded of that periodically is for me, very, very helpful. That she's there.
Yeah.
She's always there.
Yeah, she's speaking of one of the Buddhist deities of compassion, Tara, sometimes called Tara the protector, sometimes called Mother Tara or Noble Tara. And she appears in different forms with different costumes and different colors, depending on what the circumstance is. But she's one of the deity representations that Garchen Rinpoche relies on very strongly and urges us and encourages us to rely upon. And to call upon Tara in any moment of fear or doubt or pain or confusion, or any form of suffering. And I love the way you described the joy arising. It's like we're linking arms with the source of our, of our power, and we're lifted. We're lifted. So, but the Buddha Dharma is there's infinite skillful means, and so there's vast numbers of deity figures and vast arrays of practices of different kinds, different levels for different kinds of beings. And it's said that, there's 84,000 teachings for 84,000 different kinds of minds. So it's also said that there's therefore because of emptiness and karma, there is no single remedy for suffering or for any ill. But for the Bodhisattva, the remedy is always bodhicitta, and it can be outpictured or expressed or activated with reference to a deity figure, with reference to a teaching from another tradition. The Christian tradition is filled with bodhisattva teachings. It's the only other one that I know intimately. So I have found it valuable to do deity practice. It's been transformational in my practice and my life. I also find it very valuable to speak the vernacular, right? To have it be just kind of down home, the way we experience it in the moment, driving in the car or sitting on the toilet or whatever going on, that the vernacular of our daily human experience is rich with the expressions of need, the expressions of longing, the expressions of gratitude, the expressions of aspiration. That our language in the prayers, the formal prayers, these are the language expressions of the longings of many and the ways that they have been brought into expression. Very powerful, very moving and inspiring. But sometimes a groan is all that's needed. I have a friend who's very sick, and sometimes really what she can do in response to something that I'm offering as a way of working with stuff is just groan. And that's her expression in that moment. It's perfect. And I've wept a great deal on the path, and I still do. I used to weep mostly from suffering and the feeling that I was never going to be worthy and, all the stuff we know so well. Now I usually weep with love and beauty, but the other stuff can still come up occasionally. Let yourself weep. No problem. It'll pass. The sun comes out again. Particularly if in your weeping, you're expressing gratitude for what it is you're weeping for. That brings the sun out very quickly. And gratitude for the fact that you have teachings and teachers. Let me say something about teachers, because we didn't go into detail in the first 7 verses, but there's a whole section, of course, on the relationship with the teacher. I don't know what would have become of me in this lifetime if I hadn't met true teachers whose steps I could follow, whose footsteps I could follow in, and in whom I could recognize the flowering of the teachings that they were transmitting. And they're teachers at all different levels for us on the path. Everything from the person who says, oh, this is a good book, you might want to read that. I mean, that's a form of teacher. Then there's the instructor who tells us how to sit and so on. And there's a mentor who says, well, this is how it's been in my life, this is what I've learned from, and I'd be happy to support you in that. And then there's a teacher who really has mastery and knowledge. And then there's the teacher who's the formal, complete embodiment of the qualities that of the Dharma. And so all of those are beings to whom we can be extremely grateful, because they're signposts and helpers on our path. And some of them are holy gurus. And there's a great teaching in the Tibetan tradition that if you see your teacher as a ordinary person, you'll receive the blessings of an ordinary person. If you see your teachings as your teacher as a bodhisattva, you'll receive the blessings of a bodhisattva. And if you see your teacher as a Buddha, you'll receive the blessings of a Buddha. So the mind with which you engage with teacher is your motivational mind. And it doesn't imply that the teacher that you're seeing as a Buddha has no personal faults as a human being. We all come through history, karma, families, social world and circumstances and economies and stuff. I mean, we're all human. And so our responsibility as students of the Dharma is to love the Dharma and be grateful for the Dharma, to love the teacher, be grateful for the teacher, and to follow what we're given for our benefit and the benefit of all beings. It's not to become slaves. It's called the liberating Dharma. Yeah? It's not for us to become slaves and subservient and slavish and, obsessed with a teacher. That's the misuse of a teacher. Don't misuse your teacher. Ask for what you need, receive it, practice on it. That's your responsibility. That's your integrity. That's what the teacher did with his or her teacher. Don't be confused. It's not about your costume, right? Although we might go crazy about the costume initially when we come into a new tradition, we want to take it on and, and dress the part and stuff, but don't get distracted. Go for the essence. That's what Garchen Rinpoche has taught me. That was his pith instruction to me. He gave me 2 pith instructions. Take from every teaching you receive and every practice you receive, distill the essence of that teaching and practice practice on that. Practice on that, the essence. And then he said to me, and teach what you're certain of. So there you have it, pretty clear. So, pretty simple to understand and very challenging to carry out, but the simplicity and directness of it is a very clear guide. So always look for the essence of what your teacher is showing you and practice on that. Yeah? Yes, Tara. This is Tara, by the way, in case anybody wanted a direct representation of Tara. Here she sits.
Hopefully I won't blow this out. Okay, I guess it's working. You spoke of throwing your heart over the fence.
You're not quite tuned into your mic.
You spoke of throwing your heart over the fence.
Yeah.
And I was mentioning to you earlier that I really feel that in you, that your heart is over the fence and totally over the fence.
Mm-hmm.
And my heart has been on the fence.
Well said, Tara.
Teetering one direction and another for some many years after taking that vow. And I'm wondering how it was that you were able to definitively give yourself to this for all time, and if you have any suggestions about how that could be accomplished for someone like me.
I do have a suggestion. Just do it. And don't count the cost.
Sometimes it seems too hard.
Oh, it is too hard. Do it anyway. It's totally too hard. No question about it. Do it anyway. Because you're not doing it for you, honey. You're doing it for all.
When I say it seems too hard, it's that when it seems too hard, then I go back to what do I need, it becomes about me again, and I don't want it to be about me.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I think, well, maybe you need to tend to that so that it doesn't seem quite so hard, so that you can make it not about you anymore. I go back and forth with that.
Well, you asked me earlier if I could maybe speak to it in terms of my own experience. I came in longing for truth. Right? I've never wanted anything else. Oh, except I wanted at one point a little house of my own in the country. And then I got that, and I got so sick I couldn't stay there. So I was like, so I gave that up and just went back to longing for truth. Right? So I came in with that longing, and I think many of us have come in with that longing, something like that, because this is not our first time around here. Right? We've probably sat together before in other forms, maybe in an anthill, who knows where it was. But I spent most of my life stumbling and flailing and lurching around because I didn't know how to look for it. I only knew that there were certain moments when I heard a note of truth. A teaching or somebody saying something in passing, or maybe even a sound in the environment. But I was lost and confused, and I caused a lot of harm. It caused a lot of harm. And I'm here to tell you that's not all it's cracked up to be in terms of having a great life. Causing a lot of harm isn't really the way we want to go. I met teachings on the path that were very inspiring, finally. There was a way to start walking on the path in a formal sense, but it was somehow, it was when I met Garchen Rinpoche that I met someone whom I could see was the embodiment of my aspiration. And it took my aspiration from being a longing to being an aspiration. And when I made that shift, and that's why I talked about that today I think I must have talked about that most of the day. I'm not sure, but it feels like it. If you don't give rise to the aspiration, the longing still stays somewhat about you. When you give rise to that as aspiration, it becomes about all, right? That's the shift between personal longing, which may be a spiritual longing, but it's still a longing that is a form of knowing, in that we don't long for something we're not resonating to. So there's some resonance that gives rise to our longing and that is expressed through the longing, but there's still it's still about us in some way, the longing. It's when it shifts to being for all that you're freed from the helpless longing. The longing becomes potent. And a turning point came for me. You have to listen to what you yourself say. Do you listen to yourselves? Do you listen to what's in your heart? Do you listen to what's in your mind? You have to listen, because the truth is never not ringing in your mind. The sound of truth is always ringing in your mind. You have to listen. And it will sometimes come out in your words. And you'll hear your words saying something that you would never have invented. You would never have put those words together. But you hear yourself enunciating what is true for you, and it's like it lifts you up to the next level. So there have been two moments, maybe more, but the two that I'm speaking to right now that relate to your question, and this is very personal, I trust that you don't mind. YouTube. Okay. When I was 11 or maybe 9, I was in middle school. I was staying with my headmaster's family because my mother and my stepfather went away on a trip for a while, and I was staying with their family. And she took me to the first concert I'd ever attended in Symphony Hall in Boston. The seats were blue velvet. I was just a 9-year-old girl, you know. I didn't know anything about classical music, and I didn't know anything about anything really in life. I was from West Virginia, you know, but I was living in New England at that time. So she took me to this concert, and I'm sitting on the blue velvet seat, and I remember thinking, and I wrote it down in a diary somewhere. Otherwise, I might not have remembered it. I probably would have remembered it. Here's what I thought. And I recognized the thinking. I thought it, and I saw that I was thinking it. I want to be a vessel as pure as these instruments and these voices are, to receive what is poured into it and pour it out again for all. 9 or 11? It was like the voice of lifetimes of knowing was speaking in that moment, yes? I've never forgotten it. I never forgot it was the sound of truth I was listening for, and I heard it in this purity of sound that I'd never heard in my life before. That, you know, beautiful music, the purity of the sound is extraordinary. So that was one. I never forgot that. That was like a vow, you know, and I never forgot it. I had no idea what to do with it. And I'm saying this to Tara, as well as you, Tara. I didn't know what to do with it. Please show us what to do with our knowing. Please show us what to do with our knowing, you know. So then the next moment came in a very unexpected way. Christina was making a film. And she was doing interviews here at the Institute, and she interviewed me. I had no idea why. I've never been a great practitioner, I'm certainly not a great meditator, and I'm certainly not a scholar, you know. So I didn't know why Christina had asked to interview me, but I knew she was interviewing a lot of people. I figured it was going to be sort of scattershot. She would, you know, she'd get a lot of people rounded up. She'd do a lot of interviews, and she'd pull some information that might be useful for the film. I didn't know about it filming anything either, and I didn't know the caliber of her mind. and the caliber of her Bodhisattva intention and the quality of her work. So I just said, sure. So I hobbled down to one of these little huts. I think it was one of the ones up here. And she had her things set up, with a recordings. I don't know. She had a screen that she had a big photography thing happening. And anyway, it was just Christina and me. I don't think there was another person there. And she asked me some questions. We talked, and we talk very well together. Our minds work really well together. And so we had a good conversation, and I'm sure I spoke about Garchen Rinpoche, because Garchen Rinpoche is, I just feel he saved me in this lifetime, So I didn't remember that I'd said this until I saw the film for the first time. And at the end of the film, there's a voiceover, and that's my voice, in which I said, and this was a life-changing moment for me, to say this and then to hear it, because I didn't quite remember. If Rinpoche can do it, I can do it. And if I can, I must. And if I must, I shall. And that was the over-the-fence moment for me. And then I followed him. I saw him getting older all the time. I saw him losing his eyesight, as I'm experiencing a little difficulty in that department right now also. And I saw him going. I mean, like, it's insane. All these years, all these countries, all these cities, it's just inconceivable at his age. But it's, as he would say, it's just bodhicitta. I have nothing else. All I have is bodhicitta and the 37 bodhisattva practices. And so in all the years since, I don't remember what year that was. What was it, maybe 2009 or something like that? What year did you make? 1999. Maybe, I forget, but it was a while ago. And I've never forgotten that I made that vow, I made that commitment. If he can, I can. If I can, I must. If I must, I shall. That takes me over the fence over and over again. So I think you go over the fence once, and then you keep going over the fence again and again and again. Right? I think it's like the commitment to living when you've been very, very sick, dangerously ill, and you make a commitment to living and you're carried through and you continue to live. That commitment to living needs to be made again and again and again, choosing life. So do it now, don't wait. Do it now. Yeah. There is no time. We know that. Time is our fiction, but there's also no time. Hurry up. Do it now. At whatever level you're capable of, do it now. Not everybody's going to say that kind of transcendent vow thing that I heard in the film. That was pretty transcendent. But not everybody's going to say that. I would never have thought I'd say it, but whatever your version of that, of the Bodhisattva commitment and aspiration is, whatever your status there, whatever your condition is of a practitioner, of a person with spiritual longing, of a person who loves others, whatever it is, do that. Do that. Act on that commitment. And articulate it. There's something about saying these things out loud that's very important. It's very important. That's why people in a marriage ceremony say their vows out loud. We witness ourselves with our vows. The vow ceremony is always out loud. Yes? Okay. And you know, as I want you all to know, as I said, I'm not a great practitioner, I'm not a great meditator, I'm just a practitioner. I'm here to help. I'm here to support you. And I'm available. And we will have probably a local group starting in the fall, which will be lovely for those of you who are close enough by or who can come from time to time at least. We'll have a local group that maybe, I'm hoping we'll meet once a month at least. And that will probably be very up close and personal, not abstract, working directly. So we'll see what happens. But there's help all around us. Kempo, have some of you met Kempo here? Kempo Tenzin? This is a jewel of a teacher, a young Lama whose mind is so limpid, is so clear, so pure and clean that I haven't received teachings from him, but I've been in his presence. And I've seen him in a public situation where he was being publicly recognized, and I saw the simplicity there was no self there receiving that honor. This is somebody worth listening to. And his English is getting better, and sometimes he'll teach with translator, which is probably a very good thing for us all. So there's help all around, you know. Rinpoche, his ability to help us will not be limited in any way by debility or death. Not in any way. In fact, my principal root guru, my first root guru, His Holiness Dujin Rinpoche, whom I spoke about earlier this evening, he's available to me all the time. There's more availability, not less. Because there's always, as Garchen Rinpoche has told me, no matter how we work with our grasping, as long as we have a body, there's a point of reference that we keep turning to. And as long as we have a body, there's a little bit of self-grasping. So, no shame. No shame that we have self-grasping. It comes with the territory. Yeah? I've received that as very great kindness on his part to tell me that. He told me privately, but he knows I'm teaching because he requires it. So he knows anything he tells me is going to come out of this mouth too, eventually. So. Doesn't this feel like the last? One thing, can I speak for a moment about this evening? On the schedule, they're scheduled 4 meditations, morning to tonight, and then tomorrow and tomorrow morning, and then Sunday morning, from 7 to 7:45. In the past, very few have come. I do make an effort to show up for those. I might just sometime not be able to, but at the moment, if he can, I can. Tonight, I would like to do something a little different. This is a full moon. And it's a full moon on Friday the 13th, which to some people seems particularly significant. I don't think Friday the 13th is any different from Friday the 12th, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe there's something I don't know. Do you think? But there is a particular practice that we do on the full moons. It's the practice of Kuntuzangpo, the prayer of Kuntuzangpo. And instead of a silent meditation tonight, I would like to sit with you and we would recite the prayer of Kuntuzangpo loud so that everyone can hear. Yeah? Good.
Outside? Outside?
Well, we could do it outside. Is it better to do it outside? Christina, what's your advice about that?
Well, we might be able to see the moon. I guess.
Well, there's that we can see because it'll be right there, right?
I'm not sure it's going to be that visible at that hour.
Well, we'll see something. Yeah. I think later is maybe not too realistic, but yeah. Well, why don't we gather here at 7? And then we'll decide about whether we're going to do it here or whether we're going to do it outside. It might depend a little on the smoke. I don't want people inhaling the smoke. Yeah. So does that sound like something you're happy about? Yeah. This is a very powerful prayer that actually is the entire path. This particular single practice gives the instruction for the entire path, particularly how to work with the afflictive emotions. And it's just extraordinary. It's like extraordinary. 7 o'clock then, we'll meet again. Okay, good? All right. Tricked you. See, I knew you wouldn't come if it was a silent practice, but... Yes, Christina?
There's a question online.
Yes. Can you read, can you tell us this question?
Yeah, let's get the microphone so that we hear.
Oh, you need the mic. Right.
Cyrus was asking if you could speak about so-called compassion fatigue.
For what? So-called compassion for what?
Fatigue.
Oh, yeah.
And is it more like empathy fatigue?
No. I don't think it's like empathy fatigue, particularly, but in both cases, the fatigue comes from the self-reference that's involved. Bodhicitta is not fatiguing. Authentic compassion is not fatiguing. Authentic objective love is not fatiguing. The body may get tired. You know, the body will tire because it's matter. But the mind of compassion, that's objective compassion, that's bodhicitta, there's no fatigue in the bodhicitta. So objective compassion is not fatiguing, but our self-interest is very fatiguing, very fatiguing. I read once many years ago, sorry Cyrus, I'm taking a little digression here, but I read many years ago in the writings of Alice Bailey, who was a theosophist, I think that's what we call her. She said, or the Tibetan teacher who was one of the teachers teaching through her, said, all on the path are weary. Remember that. Because until you're not weary anymore, you get wearied. And but bodhicitta is authentic, objective love and compassion. And as long as we're practicing relative bodhicitta, there's still self-grasping involved. We just keep practicing, right? There's no magic fix for that. We keep practicing. And the more we're loving and compassionate for others, the less self-grasping we have. Our self-grasping diminishes in our love and compassion for others. You know this story, some of you, this experience I had with Garchen Rinpoche when I was sitting in front of my shrine in the house I was living in at the time, and I was just assailed by the gap between my aspiration and my accomplishment in terms of becoming selfless and having authentic compassion and love. And Cyrus, I think you remember this. I'm sure I've told you this story before. The pain that I experienced in that moment was unbearable. It was like, I can't get there, sort of like that kind of pain. From here, I can't get there, you know. So I said out loud, I'm alone in my bedroom with where my shrine was, I said out loud, Rinpoche, how will I ever get rid of this egregious ego? Those were my exact words. Instantly came back his exact words. Your ego will dissolve in your love for others. No ego, no tiredness. But don't try to destroy your ego. That's a murderous impulse based on ignorance. Don't try to destroy it. Just work on building your bodhicitta. And for people who work with great numbers of sentient beings who are suffering, as our questioner does, in the fields of suffering, there is weariness. There is weariness. And people use the term compassion fatigue to describe the desire to no longer be compassionate or to give or to keep working in the fields of suffering because it's so unending and one becomes hopeless. But working to liberate beings from the causes of suffering and from the suffering that arises from those causes, is without reference to time. And an understanding of emptiness helps us with that, and we're going to work with that this weekend, which will help. There's a prayer, perhaps you know, it may be Gampopa, or maybe it's something from the Zen tradition. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. And there you have it. So you do what you can on Monday, and then you do what you can on Tuesday, and you do what you can on Wednesday, and some days you can do more. But the doing is the effort that we make for the benefit of beings. But the bodhicitta is effortless. We're not manufacturing something. We're nourishing by our activities the growth of something that is already there in seed. So the doing mind gets very tired. The being mind, there's no tiring. Is Cyrus online? Can you tell?
There's a large delay with
Oh,
the
yeah, okay.
speed
Well,
of
we're
our
at the end
internet.
for the afternoon. So thank you for your questions, Cyrus. Thank you very much. And maybe you'll tune in again tomorrow. We're at the end of the day. We will do our dedication of merit after our evening practice. Okay? And if anybody's leaving, are you leaving at this? So just dedicate the merit for all beings as you drive down the road. And I hope the smoke lessens so that you're not having to drive back through the smoke the way you drove through to get here. Thank you for coming. Are there others who are leaving at the end of this session? Yes? Thank you very much for coming. Everyone who's here is very important to what happens here and very precious. So, anybody else leaving? No, good. And I think maybe one or two more people might come tomorrow, so that'll be lovely. So I wish you a lovely supper, and see you here at 7 with Kuntu Zangpo, who's excellent company.